Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time for another episode here at No Turning Back. Today, Stan, McChrystal, and I have a discussion with a good friend of ours, Roy March. Roy is the CEO of Eastdil Secured, a corporate real estate brokerage firm that we've done some work with them over the years. We've written about them in case studies. We wrote about them in one of our books, One Mission. But more importantly, we've maintained really close ties and relationships with Roy and other members of his senior leadership team. On a headcount size, Eastdil is, less than 1,000 people, but on a scale of complexity and dollar throughput, the distribution around the world, the different markets they play in, it's an incredibly complex business, and they have offices all around the world. They started in the U.S., New York, L.A., etc. There was a merger years ago that brought together two smaller firms, and then they've just expanded constantly over the last several years around the globe. And they, at several hundred people, they manage billions of dollars in transactions per year. So. And there's just no slack in their system. They're a very focused team, very thoughtful team. They connect very well. It's like a very family feel amongst each other, but they work incredibly hard, right? So it's that unique dynamic that so many of us long to be part of. And Roy's at the helm of it. I mean, he's this exceptional leader. He's been there, started his career there. He's come all the way through the ranks in this organization, from being an unpaid intern to being the CEO of this incredibly effective organization. And so he's led it through ups and downs over the years. And obviously, the whole real estate world is sideways right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, making a lot of the future in that space very uncertain. So we have a great discussion around how he's seeing the market, how he's leading his team, how the team is handling it, and where he thinks all of this is heading down the road. A lot to learn from a leader like Roy March. Hope you enjoy this discussion. Thanks. Roy, thank you for taking the time to join Stan, myself. As an open comment, understand how busy you are and the whole team at Eastdil. And all of you are on our thoughts all the time. Just an amazing team that you lead there. And so we'll spend some time talking about that throughout the next hour or so. And really looking forward to that discussion around the culture you're part of there at Eastdil, how you've grown up through it, led it over the years, et cetera. Before we get there, though, I'm going to take sort of first rights and ask you just a current question, because of the space you're in the real estate world writ large, and the massive changes taking place there because of COVID. Let's talk about the office space, because there's countless debates around that. What is changing because of this experience? What do you think is going to accelerate? What habits are going to come back into place, et cetera? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, and actually it's the number one question we get when we're talking to global investors and domestic investors, which is, what is the office space going to look like? And COVID, with all the lockdowns that have occurred, have really accelerated some of the secular trends that were underway in many respects. And there's been a focus globally around what they call ESG, which is environmental, social, and governmental considerations as part of what people were looking at as being important parts of their corporate responsibilities, if you will, in terms of how they were looking to invest in real estate itself and how that played its role in the world itself. And so we think that health and wellness in buildings in particular is a primary focus. So whether it's going to be the experience of entering a lobby or no-touch controls on elevators and the like, those are all going to be super important. And those all have to be put into a really comfortable place for people to really feel like it's a safe and responsible place to come back to. So those things which were started will be accelerated and reinforced and heightened in terms of importance, that's for sure. And the work from home, we think, will increase, but not necessarily to the detriment of physical office space necessarily overall. There's a number of studies that have been done And if you look at the statistics between 2005 and 2017, about 159% increase in remote work. And today, nearly 5 million people are working from home. And so we think that the trend will be in that direction. But we don't think it's going to necessarily accelerate in the intermediate to long term as people are ultimately predicting. And one of the leading interior architectural firms in the world that works with all types of tenants has done a variety of different studies and has been in terms of looking at what the contemporary workspace looks like and what the future workspace looks like. And in their surveys, 88% of the people want to go back to work, whereas 12% are looking to work at home full time. And so if you look at how the space will ultimately be designed, we think that it's going to be flexible so that it's not just one shape fits all, if you will. And we think that while there may be more of a circulation, if you will, or a staging of how and when people come in, flights, if you will, or phases of people coming back in, it's going to be done in a very considered way, and it's going to have to feel safe. But we believe that as a result of that spacing, that it won't necessarily take actual square footage required away. It just may be a repurposing of it or a reframing of it. And ultimately, we think that the amount of space is likely to be in or around the same as a result of the flexible space that's going to have to be incorporated in the modern and near-term office itself. It's interesting because you can get both sides of that, but I think that the death of the office space has been grossly exaggerated overall. And if you look at, again, this is unprecedented in terms of what we're facing, and so you can't draw complete parallels to it. But back, in 2004 or so, IBM went to a workforce from home or remote workforce. And by 2009, 40% of their workforce was working from home. At the same time, there was a 17% decrease in their revenue. And interestingly enough, players like Oracle, Microsoft, Adobe, Accenture invested in office and people, growing, cultures and a shared consciousness, if you will, to the point where IBM ended their work from home in 2017. And so I think that it obviously depends on very much whether it's technical or non-technical use of this work from home. I think that a lot of the technical stuff can be done remotely, but I think that, as I say, it's virtually impossible to kind of keep up the pace at which growth has to occur. And I don't think you can replace innovation and energy that comes with people being physically present. And we think that that's the key to creating, profitable and unique cultures in the corporate world.
Roy, that's fascinating. I'm going to presume a little on our friendship to ask a wisdom question. You and I have both been to multiple rodeos. I've been thrown off the bull a couple of times, get kicked when I'm down. But you've been through 4 major market cycles. So I'm going to ask you a 2-part question. The first is, so where does 2020 fit into that sort of historic sweep? And then how does that affect how you lead and communicate?
Well, each one of them is different in many ways, and there's similarities in terms of its impact on certain segments of the population. This one feels more global and universal in its impact, that it's come in waves from east literally to west. And so we've been able to see this as a little bit of a precursor. But if you look at most of the other big downturns, whether it was the Asian currency crisis or whether it was the GFC or candidly back into the late 80s, early 90s, a commercial real estate-led recession as a result of the savings and loan crisis. Each one of them, impacted a certain segment of the industry, whether it be financial, and then obviously the global financial crisis hitting everything financial. But it hit industries and segments. This one seems to be different in that it's impacting everybody universally. And while something like a 9/11 crisis can occur and bring people together, it was somewhat isolated, and there was what we would call a common threat, if you will, that we could all focus on from a global perspective. We do have that element here, but with the polarity that is existing in the global geopolitical arena, it's a little bit more challenging to figure out how we all are going to work together towards this common goal at the end of the day. But from my experience, at least, is that you do approach it in the same way, which is you sort of set up this triage, if you will, to assess, in essence, kind of what the exposure is in many respects. And then you try to calmly and rationally, but directly and expeditiously kind of attack, if you will, the foundation to make sure that you are mitigating the risks associated with it with your own organization, so that you can then be a force for good with your clients at the end of the day. And then candidly, you keep an eye open for where the opportunities are at the end, so that people not only feel your presence, if you will, in all of that, but they understand that you have, almost innately a sense that there's going to be opportunity that comes out of this, so that instead of being curled up in a ball, paralyzed by fear, that there's an opportunity to look at it as something where change can be embraced, and one can adapt, and one can create opportunities for themselves in this. It's hard because you're in that moment of stress and meltdown, if you will. But it's kind of the way we try to approach it. And I think that, in many ways, these types of things test your mission, your culture. They expose the negatives and all the things you thought that you were doing well, and maybe got a little bit too comfortable and complacent with. And it also reveals the core values, I think, of an organization. And those are the things those foundation pieces that you go back to. So that's kind of what we did, which was we stepped back and we said, what's our mission? What are our guiding principles? And then we kind of added to that third thing, which is, listen, what are the characteristics of what we think we are supposed to be to others? And how do we implement that for ourselves? Take, in essence, our own advice around all this. And it was literally to be calm, to be rational, to be honest, to be communicative, to assess these exposures, and then try to mitigate the risks, and then look for where the opportunities are for ourselves and with our clients, and then get on with it, push everything out as quickly as possible, communicate with as many people throughout our own organization as we could, as fast as we could, to kind of keep the hyperbole out of it, candidly, to really just, with empathy, and help people understand we're there with you. We're there for you, and we need to be these things for ourselves, and we need to be these things for our clients.
Roy, that's a great laydown of how you've approached it. So almost everything there has a cultural component to it. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit with you. I've had this conversation with you before, but coming from the SEAL teams, when we were doing deeper work with Eastdil, my wife Holly, who was she heard me talk about Eastdil so much, and I know the day she finally understood it. We went to an event in at one of your offices. She was invited, and then 5 minutes in, she said, "Oh, now I get it. These are like a bunch of SEAL team folks, but they're just in nice suits, right?" That's a very cohesive culture, and it's true across the board of all the folks I've interacted with at Eastdil. I mean, it's a fun, team-oriented, spirited group who is deadly serious when it's time to be serious, right? And always putting mission first towards the client. That's easy to throw on a poster. It's very hard in execution, especially during times of crisis. Can you walk through a little bit how you've seen that evolve over the years and how you've managed it through windows like this?
Yeah, I think that from our perspective, I think that we look at ourselves as a partnership, and you can, put all the labels in terms of corporate and limited liability corporations and legal entities in terms of your overall structure. But we've always looked at it as a partnership, and the roots of the firm were really in partnership. It was an investment banking culture, and it was the original investment banking cultures that were historically partnerships. So it was really all for one for all, for the benefit of the client. If the client wins, the firm wins. If the firm wins, the teams win. And if the teams win, the individuals celebrate. And so everybody gets a ring, and there's one trophy at the end of the day, and that trophy is held up by, candidly, the client, if we do this right. And I think that I always tell people who are looking to come to an organization like ours, or candidly looking for any organization that they might join, just make sure that the values and the principles of the people who and the company who live those principles are consistent with your own. So you don't have to check those at the door going in and going out every single day. And so I think that, again, being discreet and honest and trusted and people having faith in you. And that means, nurturing, the family inside, because that's the example of how you treat our family outside, our clients, if you will. And so at the end of the day, we want to invest in our people so that they feel comfortable investing candidly in our clients. And it's got to be it's constant at the end of the day. And I think that you have to love what you do, and you'll never work a day in your life has been a common theme within our organization. And that collaboration and camaraderie, ultimately in an environment like this, is not only essential. And I will tell you that the leadership team within Eastdil Secured, which I'm blessed with, every one of us are as concerned about each other's family as we are in our business itself, because they are so intermixed and so intermingled that there's 450 people who we call partner colleagues, but I think of 450 families at the end of the day that we need to take care of. And if we take care of them, they can help take care of our colleagues, and those colleagues can take care of one another, and we can then take care of our clients.
Just a quick follow-up on that, because you're teasing out a critical point there. One of the questions that you'll often get from leaders that are front end of a process, like you've gone through for many years there, will say, well, where does it start? What are people looking for, et cetera? And we'll always say they're looking at you. Like, it starts with you and your leadership team, the example you set, being disciplined, focused, et cetera, on the changes you want to make and improvements you want to see, et cetera, over not days, not weeks, but over your lifetime inside the organization. Can you talk a bit about, because I've seen you mirror this to your organization amongst other leaders there at Eastdil. What's your routine look like right now? What's your day-to-day? Who are you communicating with, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I mean, we went from a cadence, if you will, from our what we called our market intelligence call, which you helped us get started with back in 2015, which allowed us to connect with our offices globally. And we do that. We've done that historically every other week has been the cadence around that. And then in between those weeks, we've had the product teams, whether it's office, retail, finance, loan sales, et cetera, communicate. And then we've actually had the liaisons within it. So there's been this constant network, if you will, of communication that's gone on. And what we did was we increased that to a daily cadence, as it relates to what we do in the early days. Tried to get as much information to as many people, and then press it out so that people had what one would call freedom of action, if you will, around the situation on the ground, and then just making sure that there's that constant assessment, if you will, around it. Our choice was to be super communicative at this point in time. Don't hide in a corner. Don't put your head in the sand. Let everybody know what's going on with the firm and what's going on in the industry, what our role is in it, and what we can be doing as a result of that, and try to share that communication as real time as we possibly can. So I get up earlier than I used to, and because I find to be on a call every single morning with every single office that is putting together one of their calls, and sometimes that's 3:30 in the morning in Europe. Sometimes it's 10 o'clock at night if it's going to be in Hong Kong or the Middle East or London. So being present is super important, and reinforcing the mission and reinforcing, if you will, the information that we can share that are going to make people, more valuable in their roles.
Roy, this is going to sound self-evident to you, but some people would say, why don't you just, at your point in life, just tell the team to work harder and you supervise from a step back and not be up at 4:30 in the office at 4:30 every morning? What's the importance of the example?
Well, I think in particular, listen, our whole goal is to leverage the talent that we have. So we have pushed this out significantly, and we do it every single day. But in a time of crisis, I think that people want to be led by people who've been through crises. Again, this is unprecedented. Nothing's the same, but there are parallels. So they want to see that, hey, you're engaged, that you haven't, kind of left the auditorium, and that you are leading as a result of the experience that you've had, and that you're trying to pass on that experience, as virally as you possibly can. So I think it's important to be present, and I'm not the only one present. The point of view is that, every one of our leadership teams are present, and each one has a role, and everybody's kind of divided and conquered. So I'm not the only one getting up and doing that. And people, again, our experience over the years when we've gone through these crises is they want to see somebody, who's in the leadership position actually leading, not, reacting to the market itself.
At the lowest level in the Army is the team, and it's 4 infantrymen, and it's led by a young sergeant, usually with 2 to 3 years in the military. And the description of their leadership is follow me, do as I do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, you didn't start as a senior vice president.
No.
Still. Can you describe, because I love the story of how you came in and your path through the organization.
Yeah. Well, I snuck in, is the truth. I came in as an unpaid intern in a role that I helped develop. And I did it because I wanted to get some experience to be able to put on my application for business school. I wasn't a particularly outstanding student, and so experience was going to hopefully make a difference in applying for a graduate degree. So I worked my way into being hired as an unpaid intern. And I didn't know I actually even wanted to do this, but the harder I worked, the more I was recognized, and the more I was recognized, the harder I worked, and it just became this virtuous cycle, if you will. And when it was all over, after 3 months, I went back and got units at the university to graduate, and they decided to pay me the same salary as an assistant. And that probably was more than I deserved at the time, given what I really did or didn't know. But it allowed me, and I was totally immersed because it was pretty small at the time. The firm was 11 years in its existence. I'm here now going on 43 years. And I obviously never went back to graduate school. What I was able to do as a result of being immersed in it was to learn the craft. And to learn the cultural uniqueness that had been put out there by, Ben Lambert in founding this industry, and to be able to then learn, why it was different, what distinguished it, and to learn along the way. But it was really the craft and really doing my stewardship, if you will, in all that. But literally, it's helpful when you're asking people to do things, that you understand exactly what it is that you're asking them to do. Some people would call it empathy on one side, which is kind of the softer side of it. The other side is that you've actually had the experience. So you're not asking people to do anything that you haven't done, let alone wouldn't do.
Yeah, powerful.
Roy, let's pull on that thread maybe a little bit, the sort of around the evolution of that aspect of the culture a bit and how you create that connectivity with your clients and that focus. And the analogy I would draw is what happened in the special operations world. And I was on the analyst level, so to speak, to as part of this change process, sort of experiencing it on the front edge. And there was this shift, and Stan obviously can add color to it as the architect, but there was this shift from, because we'd grown up in a world where you go out and close deals, essentially. Go out, do missions, then come home. And now that the fight was so much more complex that wasn't going to work anymore. And so the language started to pivot toward, we as a collective need to be based on trust, on relationships, on integrity, on sharing of information, on really understanding our friends and allies and local support structures, et cetera. If that stuff is in place and we have the culture that you just described, surrounding it, then the winning of the missions will be the outcome. So this reversal of order, which I think is unique in anything close to financial services, right? Because it's all about get the next deal done. Can you talk a bit about how you maintain that and how you onboard people? Because I'm assuming when they come into your organization, that's a different feel than they see in other places.
Yeah, it is, and a lot of what we ultimately have is organically grown through literally the intern programs, through summer programs and the like, and it allows us to expose people to our culture and to what our profession is, and candidly the uniqueness of it. And so we think that that exposure is super important, helping people to determine what their life's path or professional path might be. And I think that at least from my perspective, it is. I constantly marvel at the fact and am humbled by the fact that our clients entrust us with their life's work, oftentimes, with their net worth, with their professional career to execute on something. So it's our responsibility and obligation to make sure we do everything we can, every resource that's available, every relationship that's out there to fulfill that trust. And I think that very element, right, of trying to give people the confidence that you are searching for the right things for the right reasons all the time, it attracts and helps develop the entire organization. And I think that, again, obviously the entire leadership team and all my partners and colleagues have that feeling, but I think people are drawn to this organization as a result of its culture, and then how do you enhance it as a result of whether it's using the tools of technology to share information real time and the like. And again, I kind of look back at productivity, and I asked Stan this question in the first meeting, which is, how did you get all these operators, elite operators, to ultimately cooperate when they thought that they knew what they were doing best? And the way you do that, I think, is through respect and trust. People respect the people they're working with. They feel an obligation to fulfill their role as part of the partnership, if you will, so that they would be letting down some element of the team if they did not participate in that. They're energized and stimulated by the people to the left and to the right of them. And that I believe that the human element is, people want to do the right thing for the right reasons innately, and sometimes the environment may direct them in different ways. But I think that Stanley, you said we had our zealots and we had our martyrs, and ultimately what we're looking for are the people who do believe in what we're trying to accomplish, and as a result, we're constantly reinforcing that by, again, trying to do the right thing for the right reasons, and it tends to attract people. And you can't ever not do that. In other words, you can't compromise on that once, because people see what you do, not what you say. And so if there's that compromise that comes where you're trading off something for yourself for the benefit or at the cost of someone within the firm and ultimately outside with our clients, you're compromised entirely. And so the way I look at it is every single day is a cultural challenge, to maintain and keep that going. And I think that, again, we're just trying to help people be the best version of themselves so that they can be the best version of what we are as an organization. I know it sounds a little, maybe sappy, but it's exactly what we try and do.
Well, I think you've nailed something that's incredibly important. And it gets back to a personal example that you said, not just coming in early, but how you treat people in the organization. But people do watch very closely. They want to see in the moment if you could make a little more money here at the cost of maybe not quite living up to the values that we espouse. They watch that just incredibly closely, and they go to school on it.
Yep.
And they internalize it. And that's what makes it so important. I want to switch to your young people a little bit because they're in an interesting point in their careers. Most of them are regionally focused for day-to-day work. They're somewhere and they're focused on deals in that area. But at the same time, you've asked them to do that in a global context. You've asked them to think. Can you talk about that? How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, I like to think that, we like to out-local the locals and out-global the globals. And I think that it's through communication. And that is, sharing data and information as real-time as we possibly can. And it's not easy because we have so many data points coming in. I mean, it's not like we're a technology company per se, but we have a lot of real-time data doing $225 billion transactions a year. Over the course of 10 years, it adds up, and that information is unique to us, unique to the people who we serve, but unique to us. And while all confidential, we do have the knowledge of that. So I think that you kind of have to trust to be trusted. You sort of have to show that trust first, and then let people by example and proof. Reinforce that trust so that more and more actually gets shared. And so these and I did ask this question of you at one point in time. How did you have 7,000 people on a VTC and ultimately feel confident that it was secure? And the answer in your case was people's lives depended on it. In our case, our professional careers depend on discretion and being able to use this information and collaborate. And it's part of our, principles, as to be an intelligence-driven organization. So sharing this information as deeply as we can, encouraging them to develop relationships at their level to make their counterparty peers as smart and intelligent as they can possibly be to grow their careers. Ultimately, there's just this flourishing. It's just the what we'll call a super bloom that ultimately happens in the evolution of their career, but also in the evolution of the peers that they're working with. So that's really we're trying to encourage people to do that, develop these deep relationships, and you do that by helping them develop their careers as well. And one day, and it's happened, 42 years later, there's been several cycles in my career where I've seen, the most junior people, developing that and leveraging it.
That's great.
Roy, in the space of sort of the younger folks, your next generation of leaders, et cetera, one consistent theme that I've seen in many different spaces now is great leaders get scale by creating other great leaders.
Yeah.
In the similar approach. Can you share with folks a little bit about Ben, who he was, the firm he created, how he mentored you and others up inside to take the helm at a certain point, and then how you mentor others personally? What is your approach there? Because I know you.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the key to our business is leveraging relationships and intelligence, if you will, and it just simply, me trying to control relationships and knowledge is a bottleneck in the system, and as you know, the ability to be able to push that information out as quickly as possible, and to hopefully attract people who think with the same mindset that again, if the client wins, the firm wins. If the firm wins, the team wins, and the individuals win alongside of it. And it's an old adage that if you do the right thing for the right reasons, everybody benefits, and so does the financial bottom line, which is how do you then make sure that people are invested in, right? We don't pay anyone. We invest in our resources, and those are our people. And so I've been blessed with, having grown up, really with the tutelage of the guy who founded the real estate investment banking business. It was a totally different, approach to the industry when Ben Lambert founded the firm. And it was really to try to take the disciplines of investment banking and candidly the cultural benefits of a partnership in investment banking and apply those. And so I was able to then just kind of refine and hone some of the cultural elements. And then, we've been blessed along the way in partnership either with institutions or ultimately with the merger of Secured Capital, for example. People talk about the fact that it was a perfect hand-in-glove fit in terms of our complement of services that we could deliver. But candidly, it was the intellectual capital that came along with it and what I call the pure purpose of people that was the greatest benefit of that, because we got the most outstanding complement of people to add to what we already had. And literally, again, the old adage, 1 + 1 = 10 in our case. And we were able to leverage that. And so we got what I would call a step function out of that transaction, not because all of a sudden we were able to do more transactions in and of itself. It was because we got the spirit, the culture, the intellectual capital exactly right. And so the leadership team, led by Mike VK and Jim McCaffrey in particular, and as well as Jeff Weber and Jeff Scott and Steve Silk and Jay Borsey, along with Ben and myself. I mean, any one of those people, and candidly, any one of the 18 management committee members could be doing what I do, just as easy. And next man up at the end of the day. And that culture is what, and that attitude is what ultimately allows us to be able to deliver a consistent, relevant advice.
Boy. Roy, I spent some time on the board of directors of one of the Wall Street banks, and we spent a lot of time talking about risk. And there were computer models, and there were all kinds of equations. But at the end of the day, I thought we sometimes looked at risk with a small r, when in reality, there's the larger concept of risk that I would capitalize. I want to know how you think, if somebody were to ask you, Mr. March, how do I think about risk? Where would you start?
I would say that our biggest risk is losing our way in any one situation. So when you think about it, we have a major risk every single day with every single person within our organization. Every colleague, partner, family member has got to represent us. We are unique in our industry in that we are looked at as one. It's the benefit and it's the exposure, because every single individual colleague, partner, family member represents us. And if they foot fault, the entire organization is at risk. And it's not just discretion, it's judgment. And again, when you look at, people having situational awareness and giving them freedom of action, your biggest risk is, right, when you push that out, is that they make those mistakes. And again, what you have to do is you have to be quickly there to support them in the situation, reinforce where the mistakes had been made. And 99.9% of the time, it's unintentional, right? It's just that next step of thought process that didn't go through. And to learn from it and to make sure that the entire firm doesn't look at that person as having failed, but as us having now learned something as a result to be better at what we do. But I think the risk is in every single minute of the day with every single one of our people, not fulfilling, the mission at hand. I mean, think about it in your context, somebody, stray shot, and it's, it influences the entire force.
Just building on that, I think, I've never really drawn those parallels you just laid out, Roy, but it is a unique aspect of the way Eastdil has evolved, where everyone owns the firm's reputation multiple times per day. Every email, every conversation, every outing, etc. And that was one of the key points that, as you know, so Stan McChrystal chose this North Star word around credibility as the anchor to keep us all focused every single day. Every one of you owns our credibility every single time you step out the door. Which is a powerful tool. Doesn't matter how senior you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been here. You're now here. You own that badge. The one last question. We want to be respectful of your time here, but out of any good crisis, we'll learn important things and we'll be better for it. I'm just a huge believer in that. What do you see happening that gives you hope and encouragement that as we get through this strange year, we'll be better for on the backside?
Yeah. Well, I hopefully will respect our planet a little bit more, with a little bit more focus. If this doesn't tell you how vulnerable we are in a global citizen context, nothing does. So I'm hopeful. My prayerful thoughts are that we respect the planet itself. We respect humanity. I sit in California part-time where we've got all these fires going on. That's a pretty good indication as to some of the challenges that may be involved with not respecting the planet enough, and whether it's fires or hurricanes or tornadoes or floods. Everybody's got a little piece of this here in the U.S. and they have it around the world. So what I'm hopeful about is that this brings to bear that a little bit more connectivity in the world as well. I mean, this polarization doesn't seem to be helping anyone anywhere. And until we kind of get to a common goal, and that common goal is to treat ourselves and to treat our planet better, I think that I'm hopeful that that's where we get. And it's funny because I look at these young kids, and I learned compassion in my past, but I think I never really understood empathy until I had that little conversation with you and Stanley and your Belinda around the release of the book. And I'll never forget this young 18-year-old kid who stepped up to the mic during the Q&A and said, I've just enlisted. I just graduated from high school, and is there anything that you can give me advice on, because I'm thinking about a career in the service? And Stan stepped back, and there's all these hardcore vets in the room, and they basically were waiting for the make your bed, discipline, commitment, all of that. And Stan, after thanking him for his service, said, son, if I could teach you or anything else, anybody, or give you any advice, it would be to develop the deepest sense of empathy you possibly can for others, not just the people you work with, but the people you work for and the people who work for you. And it was an awakening. It was an enlightenment for me, which was, how do you go from compassion to empathy? And it's interesting because as we hit this crisis, it was the one thing that I wanted to be sure of, that we weren't just giving people that kind of pat on the back, inspirational, we're going to get through this, we're going to be better than we've ever been. There was plenty of that going around our organization. But I was trying to connect with the fact that, this is unprecedented. I don't know exactly how this turns out, but I do know, based on my experience and based on the experiences of your leadership team, that we do get through this. And we will get through this time. And if I could, provide you with any sort of metaphor around it, just think about when you were a teenager and you hit your first catastrophe in life, whether it was not making a sports team or being dumped by someone who you were enthralled with. You went to your parents and you kind of explained to them what went on, and they told you it was going to be okay and you're going to get through it. And you kind of walked away and rolled your eyes thinking, what do they know about what I'm going through? And so then by the time you're in your late 20s, you have another disruption or catastrophe in your life. You go back through it, and they'll tell you the same thing, that you're going to get through it and life's going to be better. And again, you kind of roll your eyes, but there's this echo. By the time you get to a certain point in your life, you start to realize that they're not just encouraging you for the sake of trying to make you feel good. It's because they've had the experience of getting through it. So I try to actually literally share that with the younger folks who've never experienced even the GFC back in 2008. How do you relate to, these the analysts and interns in your organization, because they need this the most to be able to fulfill what we need from them and with them. And so I think that I'm constantly trying to find ways to connect with what they may be going through, know as much as I possibly can about them, their families, and their situations. And as they've dispersed, oftentimes to the basement of their parents' homes outside of New York City, where their main office may have been, try to connect with them in that regard.
Wow. Roy, I'm going to thank you in just a moment, but I want to make an observation first. And that's when you get to go through life and you get to have a journey of running into a lot of leaders, very successful people, ladies and gentlemen who've gone up the high rank or great wealth or you name it. One of the things you don't run into that often is great humility. And yet I think great humility is what opens your mind. It's what allows you to be empathetic, what allows you to learn. When I watched you, when we first met each other, changing Eastdil, keeping the great things and changing some things that you thought needed to be changes, that required you to sort of open your mind and your ego. I have not run into many leaders like Roy March, many people of the combination of humility and empathy, talent, diligence, commitment, loyalty. And I would tell you, it's been an honor today, but it's been an honor for the years we've been friends.
Yeah, well, thank you. And let's all continue to learn from one another and teach and lead.
Thanks so much, Roy.
Thank you, Roy. Best to you and the team, your family.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Take care.